Hi, Abha. Good morning. It's great to see you again. Welcome to our latest episode of Who Do You Want to Be? And today I'd like to discuss a topic that has actually been brought to my attention several times over the last couple of weeks. In all of my interactions with several HR managers, the question always came back to how do we make sure that we hire people skill-based going forward and not credential-based anymore? So what that means is basically, how do we make sure that we hire people who have the right skills and we do not pay so much attention anymore to, for example, where did our applicants study, which companies did they work for before? So it's not so much about, the big names on the CVs anymore, but it's much more about what can people actually deliver? What are they really good at? But also what is their potential? And also, to be very honest with you, what is their potential to adapt, to be flexible, and to be able to navigate in unknown environments? Because in the end, this is what it's all going to be about, right? Specifically, when we look at AI, it's so much more about really human qualities now. So when we're looking into hiring, what we want to know is, do we have an applicant who has a high emotional intelligence? Do we have an applicant who is very adaptable? Do we have an applicant who is good at critical thinking, problem solving, all of those qualities that you do not necessarily see at first glance on a classical CV? But we need to understand, do we hire the right people who can actually also survive in the environment going forward with all of those technological changes going forward? What do you think about this, Abba?
It's a really interesting topic that you've brought up, and it's really actually nice to hear that in the HR space, this is being considered as something to hire for rather than your standard credentials. Because a lot of the stuff I've been reading is that there are going to be two types of businesses moving forward in their adoption of AI. One business type that chooses to lay off their staff and replace them with AI to be profitable. And the other type of business owner or organization is going to be actually upskilling their workforce and giving them AI to diversify what they have to offer and upskill their staff to become more profitable that way. If you read about jobs lost, there are layoffs happening on a wide scale. But I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is, like you said, how can we upskill people within the organization to have the skills they need to work with AI and also build their own adaptability, resilience to change, because the organizations are going to keep changing. And then how can we hire people who are also going to be, like you said, adaptable to change? Because it is no longer about what university they went to or the credentials they have, or it's not necessarily only about the experience they have, but it's how willing they are to adapt to all the changes, to upskill themselves, whether they're new hires or within the organization. Now, I also think that people within an organization, if they are not willing to change, then if they're let go, I understand that. But if they're being let go for AI to replace them, that's probably not the wisest solution, because AI cannot work well without knowledge of the organization, without the experience of the employees. It's the only way to augment the use of AI is with employees who have experience working in that organization.
That's an excellent point that you just made when you said that it's also about the willingness of the people to actually change and wanting to be adaptable to the new requirements of their environment. I believe that it's the same thing about our motivation to actually keep learning, because in the end, AI, specifically ChatGPT, is such an invitation for us to be lazy, right? We can put in the prompt and we get all of the knowledge right there and then. We just have to read through it. We can even have it read to us. So we don't even have to put in the effort to read through it. And we immediately have what we think are the answers to the questions that we have. But what we start to forget, I believe, is that AI is also very much dependent on what we know, because our prompt is just as good as the knowledge we put into it and the understanding of the answers that we want to get out of it. And at the same time, when, for example, I am working on a document for my client for HR. I have to know what it actually is that I want to have out of it. Then ChatGPT gives me a first draft of this document, but I still also need to be able to have a critical look at it to understand what it missed, what probably doesn't belong there, or, for example, to add some very specific details that only I know because of the context that I'm in, because of the experience I have with the client or whatever else it is. And that actually leads me to say the more knowledge I personally acquired, the better and the more efficiently I can actually work with AI tools. Unless I have the willingness to also keep developing myself, I won't get the results that would actually position me as the expert that I want to be. It still very much depends on my very own knowledge, my willingness to keep developing. AI is not an invitation for me to stand still and to just completely rely on the output that I can receive from AI.
No, because all the output you're going to get from AI without your own knowledge is going to be too generic. And it might seem amazing in the beginning, especially if you're using it to get information about something you have no information about or no knowledge about. It might seem super smart, but try asking it things that you do know, and you'll start realizing very quickly that it's not that smart, and it does need to be guided. It does need input. It does need experience. And this is where I believe that if we are not adding our years of intelligence, experience, knowledge that we've acquired in a particular subject, the outputs that we're going to get are so generic that they're going to have no value anymore. And we are seeing a lot of people come into this space trying to just acquire knowledge from a tool like ChatGPT and pull it off as their own, but scratch the surface and there's nothing there. So superficial knowledge and generic level knowledge, while maybe has its place in some conversations, is not long lasting and is not going to help you or whoever you're working for in any capacity. And that's very soon going to be found out, because the value of information in general is now becoming zero, because you can literally get everything from AI tools like ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, Claude. But what you cannot get from them is what's in your mind that you have nurtured and nourished from all the years of experience, whether it's in university, from the books you've read, from the work experience you have on the job, working with clients, working with other people. The knowledge and experience that you can share as a result of that, AI is nowhere close to having any of that. So it is really in our best interest to use these tools for what they do best, which is the mundane, low leverage, repetitive tasks that we should not be spending time on, so that we can spend more time on higher order tasks like actually learning, growing our own knowledge, developing ourselves. And the people who choose to do this, rather than get a quick fix from ChatGPT just to cross it off your list and get the job done and be lazy, like you said, are the ones that are going to be able to stay in the game, if that's what I can call it. And I think the learning cycle that we are going to be getting into now and the speed with which we need to do it is almost infinite, because I don't think there's going to be an end to what we need to keep learning to be able to thrive. And if you think of it historically, this is what's happened over centuries, right? Think of the Industrial Revolution, think of the invention of electricity, think of the invention of the computers and the internet, and now we have AI. We've had to really move with the times, learn about these new things, adapt to them so that we can use them as tools to benefit, augment our own knowledge rather than depend on them like we would a crutch.
That is true. I mean, I had a discussion last week with an HR manager who is now looking for a new job, and she is still quite junior at the beginning of her career. And she was asking me for advice and a few ideas. And one of her questions was, so, Sabina, how can I make sure that in my new role, I don't make mistakes? And I just told her that, well, in the end, you can never make sure that you will not make any mistakes. At the same time, mistakes are not a bad thing because they are an opportunity for you to learn. But what you can do as much as you can to prevent mistakes is that you are just very certain about the knowledge you have in the respective situation. The more you actually know about a specific task or an interaction or a project or whatever it may be, the less likely it is that you're actually going to make a mistake. And that is exactly what brings us back to the discussion of how reliable should we, or how reliable is the output that we receive from AI, for example, specifically in a high pressure job like HR, where you are running from one task to the next, you have so many stakeholders to deal with. It's very, very tempting to, put one prompt in, take the answer and just send it straight away to your stakeholder. When your stakeholder is then getting back to you and asking you a critical question or a follow-up question about the content you sent, that is very easy to make a mistake if you are not 100% sure about the content that you sent. Do you really understand the content that you have been sharing? Do you understand what the context is? Do you actually have the ability to put this into the next level or into a different context? Are you able to apply abstract thinking about this? Because if you're not, then you shouldn't use that content to start with. That is a big, big invitation for you to make a mistake. So going back to the question of how can I avoid to make mistakes? For one, it is certainly just to be really sure about the knowledge you have. And if there is something you don't know yet, make sure that you acquire that knowledge if it's important. But also just be very, very confident about the information that you share. If you are sharing anything, just because it's a quick fix in that situation right now, because you don't have enough time to sit down and think about it yourself, for example, then that is very likely that you might even send information that's not right. Or you might send information that person wasn't looking for. And both of them mean that you made a mistake. So also when we deal with artificial intelligence, I certainly would say we also have to make sure that we very critically look at the output that we receive and we make time for that as well. Not to rush through it, but to, just read through it carefully and wonder, okay, is this really what I want to use? Or is this what I want to send and share?
And we have no excuse not to do that anymore because we're not operating from a blank piece of paper anymore. So you can use a tool like ChatGPT or Grok or Claude to come up with your first draft, which would otherwise take you a day to do or 2 days to do. You can now come up with it in minutes. So you have the rest of the day to actually look at it, refine it, think about it, add your knowledge to it. You have no excuse not to do that anymore, because you should not be spending time on the physical writing and the formatting and the structure of things, because a tool like ChatGPT can help you do that quickly. But what you can spend time on is then making that document more appropriate, more relevant, with the correct context, so that whoever's receiving it can get the value they need to get from it because it's come from your mind. So again, it's all about using these large language models like ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini to augment your knowledge rather than replace it, because the truth is it cannot. And that's why I often like to call artificial intelligence augmented intelligence, because if we think of it that way, that's how we need to use it. And that's really the only way forward, because in the future, there will be people who excel at their work because they're able to use artificial intelligence to augment their own very rich knowledge and intelligence. And then there'll be people who don't do that and just rely on very superficial level intelligence, and their outputs become very generic and mediocre. I personally don't think there'll be any room for these people in the ecosystem that they choose to work in, because they will just have no need, because they have nothing else to offer. If you're not using AI to augment your skill set, upskill, learn more, use it in a better way, you most likely will be replaced by it because you have nothing else to add, and you've not taken the time or energy to add anything from your own mind to it. So something to think about when you're choosing to use AI. And you're absolutely right. It's very easy to get lazy. So it is something we have to be very conscious of and aware of, because while generative artificial intelligence is smart, but let me tell you something about its smartness. Tools like ChatGPT are just very sophisticated autocomplete models. We've discussed this before in some of our earlier episodes. They are literally just models that are trained on so much data and information, they're able to give you a really good next best word. That's all it's doing. So if you realize that and understand that, suddenly you will realize that it actually knows nothing about strategy, or it doesn't have any intelligence at all. It's just trained really well to give you the next best word based on trillions and trillions and trillions of data sets that it's been fed. So you understand that, then suddenly you will realize how much you need to work with it to get the best from it. And this
So let me,
goes back to the point of just taking the time and effort to understand a little bit more about artificial intelligence so that you can use it to its maximum while minimizing the time and energy you spend on doing tasks yourself.
So before we end for this episode, Amma, I just want to ask you a follow-up question about something very meaningful that you said earlier, where you meant that when we are using AI, it's absolute key that we always keep learning and that we keep developing ourselves. So now, since you are being surrounded by AI all day long, every day, what is your own habit around keeping to learn? And how do you choose what's relevant knowledge for you to learn more about?
In terms of the use of AI,
That's
or
up to you. I mean, you were saying that it's important for you to keep learning and to accumulate your own knowledge.
I think across the board. So obviously I'm working in the AI space, so I'm constantly trying to learn the best way to use these tools to be able to do my job better and augment my knowledge better, and then therefore be able to transfer that to people I'm working with. So everything is a learning curve. So I'm learning all the time. I don't think there are any steps that you can write down on how to do it. You just have to play with it, and as you work with these tools and you have an objective in mind, and I think the most important thing is when you work with these tools to know what you want to get out of them, it can help you on so many different levels. So I know what I'm looking for. That helps me give clear prompts. So I get refined outputs and I get synthesized outputs. But then again, I have to use my common sense, my knowledge, my experience, my critical thinking to verify, is this information really valid? Does this make sense for my argument? So there's so much learning required. I used to be a journalist before, and we used to do a lot of research, and I have done research reports in my journalism days. But the way I'm doing research now is totally different. And I could completely ignore deep research by ChatGPT and deep search by Grok and be like, you know what? I'm just going to go to Google Scholar because that's what I know and that's what's brilliant. And I can guarantee that it's got academic citations and that's all I'm going to do. But the time it's going to take me to go through Google Scholar and do the research is like almost 10 times the amount of time I needed to do that rather than just go to ChatGPT or Grok's deep search features. So again, you can do things in depth fast, which doesn't mean they're superficial. It just means you found a different way to do things. Because these tools help our brain process information in different ways. So I think our brain is developing in different ways now as well as we use these tools. The important thing is to not stop using our brains.
That is true. Absolutely, yes. We have to keep using our brains. And while I was listening to you, I also realized the key quality that we actually might have to keep as humans is our curiosity. Because once we are not curious anymore, we won't have the motivation to learn. So ideally, we always have something that sparks curiosity so that we naturally keep learning. We don't see it as an obligation to learn, but we see it as an inspiration and probably even a passion to keep learning. So if we want to avoid losing our job or becoming mediocre going forward, let's stay curious and keep learning. Thank you so much, Abba. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. And for everyone who has been with us today, listening to us, please feel free to share with us what makes you curious. What are you passionate about learning? And if you have any other questions about how to use, for example, deep search, feel free to reach out to Abba. She can teach you all about it. Thank you.